There is a part of yourself you have spent your whole life avoiding, the thing you are worst at, the side of you that is clumsy, undeveloped, embarrassing, where you feel like a helpless child no matter how competent you are everywhere else. You have built your life around your strengths and steered carefully away from this weak place, because in it you feel foolish and exposed. And Jung is going to tell you something that will sound absurd at first. That weak, avoided, embarrassing part of you is not just a deficiency to be hidden. It is the door to your greatest treasure. The very side of yourself you are worst at is the place where your renewal, your growth, and your hidden riches are waiting. Jung wants to show you why your greatest weakness is the doorway you have been refusing to walk through. He begins by explaining how the human mind is built, because once you see it, your own weakness will make sense for the first time. Each of us meets the world through certain basic functions of the mind. There is thinking, by which we understand things through logic and order. There is feeling, by which we judge things by their value, by what they are worth to the heart. There is sensation, by which we take in the concrete facts of the world through the senses, the solid here and now. And there is intuition, by which we grasp possibilities, hunches, the whispers of where things are going. These are the four basic ways a human being engages with reality, and every one of us uses all of them to some degree. But here is the crucial thing. We do not develop these four functions equally. In each of us, one of them becomes the dominant function, the one we lead with, the one we trust, the one we have polished to a high degree and rely on to meet the world. The great thinker leads with thinking. The warm and relational person leads with feeling. The practical, grounded person leads with sensation. The visionary leads with intuition. This dominant function is your strength, your gift, the developed and trusted faculty through which you have built your life. And because it serves you so well, you lean on it more and more, developing it further and further until it becomes the proud center of who you take yourself to be. Jung explains why this happens to all of us, because it is not a personal failing, but the necessary price of becoming competent in the world. To accomplish anything, to develop real skill, to find your place and make your way, you must concentrate. You cannot develop all four functions equally and to a high degree at the same time. The energy of a single life is not enough for that. So guided partly by your inborn nature and partly by what your world rewarded, you specialized. You poured your developing energy into the one function that came most easily and served you best. And as it grew strong, it earned you success and recognition, which led you to invest in it still more in a rising spiral. This is how mastery is built, and it is good and necessary. But every choice to develop one thing is a choice to neglect another, and while your chosen function rose into the light, its opposite sank into neglect. You became someone, a definite and capable someone, precisely by leaving a large part of yourself undeveloped. The sharper your specialization, the more brilliant your strength, the more profound the neglect of its opposite. This is why the most gifted people often have the most painfully primitive weak sides. The very intensity of their gift required the deepest neglect of its opposite. And notice that this neglected side does not simply stay quietly small and harmless. Because it was left in the dark while the rest of you grew up, it remains at a childish, archaic level of development, and yet it is still there, still alive, still part of you, with all the force of something that was never allowed to mature. It is like a child locked for years in a back room of the house while the rest of the family grew and prospered. That child does not vanish. It grows resentful, unruly, and strangely powerful in its very crudeness, and from time to time it bursts out of its room and seizes control of the whole house, and then the polished, competent adult finds himself behaving in the area of his weak function like a wounded or raging child, to his own astonishment and shame. Now here's the law that governs all of this, and it is the key to everything. The more you develop your dominant function, the more its opposite is left behind, undeveloped, primitive, in the dark. Each of these functions has an opposite. thinking and feeling are opposites, the more coldly logical you become, the clumsier you're feeling. Sensation and intuition are opposites. The more grounded in concrete fact you are, the weaker your grasp of possibility, and the reverse. So the very act of developing your great strength necessarily leaves its opposite as your great weakness. This neglected opposite is what Jung called the inferior function. It is the function you have least developed, the one that stayed primitive while its opposite grew strong, the side of yourself where you remain awkward, childish, easily overwhelmed, beyond your own conscious control. Your greatest strength and your greatest weakness are not two unrelated facts about you. They are two sides of one coin. The weakness is the shadow cast by the strength. You know this inferior function intimately, even if you have never named it, because it is where you suffer most. It is the area where you behave badly despite yourself, where you are touchy and easily wounded, where strong and unruly emotion ambushes you. The brilliant thinker who is helpless and infantile in matters of the heart. The deeply feeling person who cannot follow a cold logical argument and feels stupid in its presence. The practical realist who is uneasy and lost among possibilities and visions. The soaring visionary who cannot manage the concrete details of ordinary life. In each case, there is the proud, developed strength, and beside it, the humiliating, undeveloped weakness, the inferior function, where the person feels exposed and ashamed and out of control. And our whole instinct is to hide this weakness, to avoid every situation that would call upon it, to build a life that leans entirely on our strength and never has to enter the embarrassing territory of our weak side. But now, Jung comes to the secret, the thing that turns this whole picture inside out. Your dominant function, for all its development, is also exhausted, used up, overworked, civilized into a kind of tameness. It has been in service so long that it has little fresh life left in it. But your inferior function, precisely because it has been left undeveloped in the dark, is still primitive, still wild, still full of untapped energy and life. And more than that, the inferior function is the door to your unconscious. It is the place where the developed conscious personality thins out and opens onto the vast unconscious depths beneath. This is why the inferior function carries such strong emotion, why it overwhelms you, why it is beyond your control, because through it the deep unconscious pours into your life. Your weakest function is the gate through which the renewing waters of the unconscious flow up into you. The treasure you seek, the renewal, the fresh life, the contact with your own depths does not lie in your proud and exhausted strength, it lies in your humble and avoided weakness. Jung dwells on why the door to the depths should be located precisely in your weakness, because it is not arbitrary, and understanding it changes how you regard your own clumsiness. Your dominant function is the part of you most under the control of your conscious will. It is well lit, well mastered, obedient, and precisely because it is so thoroughly conscious and controlled, it does not open onto anything beyond itself. It is a finished, closed room. But your inferior function is barely under conscious control at all. It is half submerged in the unconscious, its roots reaching down into the dark. And this is exactly why it is unruly and emotional and beyond your command, because it is continuous with the depths beneath. The very lack of control that makes it so embarrassing is the sign that it is open to something larger than your conscious self. Where you are weak, the wall between your conscious mind and your unconscious depths is thin, and through that thin place, the deeper life can pass. Your strength is a sealed door. Your weakness is an open one. That is why all the traffic with the unconscious, all the renewal and the trouble and the treasure comes through the weak side and not the strong. This also explains a humility that the work absolutely requires, and that the proud conscious mind resists. To approach your own depths, you cannot come as the master, the expert, the competent one. In the territory of your inferior function, you are not competent. You are a beginner, a fool, a child. And that is not an obstacle to the work, but its very condition. The unconscious does not open to the proud specialist. standing on his strength. It opens to the humble person willing to be a beginner, willing to be clumsy, willing to not know. This is why the door is set in your weakness and not your strength, because only in your weakness are you humble enough to receive what the depths have to give. The arrogance of the strong function would only slam the door. The humility forced on you by the weak one is the very key that opens it. Do you see the strange reversal? You have spent your life fleeing your weak side as a place of shame, when in truth it is the place of your renewal. The very thing you avoid because you are bad at it is the thing that could give you back the life and depth your one-sided strength has lost. The person who lives entirely by his dominant function becomes dry, rigid, one-sided, and eventually stale because he has cut himself off from the renewing energy that can only come through the inferior function, through the door he refuses to open. And the crisis that so often comes in the middle of life, the staleness, the loss of meaning, the sense that the old strengths no longer satisfy, is very often the inferior function clamoring at last to be let in, the neglected side of the self demanding the life it was never allowed to have. Now Jung is honest about how this door is entered because it is easily misunderstood. You do not redeem your inferior function by suddenly trying to make it as polished and competent as your strength. That cannot be done. The weak function will never become a second strength, and trying to force it there only leads to frustration. The way is gentler and humbler than that. It is to stop despising the weak side, to stop fleeing it, to be willing to enter it clumsily, as a beginner, to let yourself be a fool there, to feel the strong primitive emotions it carries without being ashamed of them, and so to let it slowly bring up the unconscious life it guards. You enter your weakness not to conquer it, but to be renewed by it, to receive through it the depth and energy and wholeness that your strength alone could never give. The goal is not to become good at your weak function. The goal is to let it make you whole. Jung gives you a more practical sense of how this entering is actually done, because the warning not to force it can leave a person unsure what to do at all. You do not assault your weak function head-on, demanding that it suddenly perform like your strength. That only humiliates you and slams the door. Instead, you approach it gently, often by way of your other middle functions, the ones that are neither your greatest strength nor your greatest weakness. If your strength is cold thinking and your weakness is feeling, you do not try to leap straight into a mastery of feeling. You begin by letting the gentler, more accessible parts of yourself lead you slowly toward the feeling side, allowing small, real experiences of value and warmth to accumulate, without grading yourself, without shame at being a beginner. You let yourself fumble. You let the strong emotions of the weak side rise, and you sit with them instead of crushing them. Bit by bit, the locked child is let out of the back room, not to take over the house, but to be given, at last, a place at the table. This is slow work, the work of years, not a technique to be applied in an afternoon. But every small entry into the avoided territory loosens the door a little more and lets a little more of the deep renewing life flow up. And Jung wants to leave you with the right picture of what success looks like here, because the wrong picture will defeat you. Success is not that your weak function becomes strong. Your inferior function will most likely remain, to the end of your life, the clumsier and more childlike side of you, and that is perfectly all right. Success is that you have made peace with it, given it a place, stopped fleeing it in shame, and opened through it a living relationship with your own depths. The person who has done this is no longer a brilliant but brittle specialist, all strength on one side and raw wound on the other. He has become rounder, deeper, more whole, more human, with access at last to the renewing life that pours through the humble door. He is not better at his weakness in the way he is good at his strength. He is simply, at last, a whole person, no longer at war with the very part of himself that holds the key to his treasure. So here is what Jung wants you to carry away. Your greatest weakness is the door to your greatest treasure. You meet the world through 4 functions: thinking and feeling, sensation and intuition. and you have developed one of them into your great strength while its opposite was left behind as your great weakness, the inferior function where you feel clumsy, childish, and exposed. You have spent your life fleeing that weak side in shame, but your strength is exhausted and your weakness is fresh, and the inferior function is the very door to your unconscious, the gate through which renewal and depth and hidden life flow up into you. The treasure is not in your proud strength, but in your humble weakness. So stop fleeing the part of yourself you are worst at. Enter it as a beginner without shame, and let it bring up the depths it guards, for the door you have been refusing to walk through your whole life is the one that opens onto everything you have been missing. If this reveal the door you have been avoiding, write 2 words in the comments so you mark it and so others find it. Write the door. And when you are ready, come with Jung to the next one, because there is another deep division among human beings, perhaps the most basic of all, that shapes how you meet everything in life. Some of us are turned outward toward the world, and some of us are turned inward toward the soul, and almost no one understands which they truly are. That is where we go next.